Well, we will call this meeting to order then. Steph, are you on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Approval of the minutes?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
I
going
do.
back. Yeah, you were on the Public Safety Committee then. So this is the approval of the minutes for November 14th, 2024.
Yes.
Perfect. So moving on to consent, Steph, is there anything you want to pull off of consent?
No, there's nothing.
Okay, for me, the motor vehicle theft recover voucher program. Jason? Oh yeah, that's my favorite person in the entire world. Can we get an update on that?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, for the motor vehicle recovery theft program, in February, there were 20,185 vouchers redeemed for 86 vehicles in 2024.
Sorry, 20,000 much?
It was for February, it was 20,185 vouchers redeemed for 86 vehicles.
Okay.
And then in 24, it was 347,749 for 1,364 vehicles. And as of January 95, year to date, we have 181 vehicles that are in the process.
Okay.
And since the beginning of the program in January of 2023 through February of 2025, there's been a total of $885,092, 3,552 vehicles.
885,000
That's correct.
for how many vehicles?
For 3,552 vehicles.
Why is that so high for 3,000 vehicles? $800,000?
Yeah, well, you look at the breakdown again for the 86 vehicles for February, it was 20,185. 24, it was 347,000. And so all the way back to 23, this is the cumulative. This is
Yeah.
what the total cost has been since it's actually started in 23.
So just that one for February, $20,185 for 86 vehicles.
Yep,
Who's charging us this? Is this M&M? Is this
yes.
M&M is charging us $20,000 to get 86 vehicles off their lot?
So that averages, Councilmember, our chair, $241 a car, which is tow fees, storage fees, and other administrative fees. So that is about right. That's what so, yeah,
That's a lot.
about between 200 and 250.
Wow,
a
that's
car.
expensive.
We limit it on 3 days, I think, Chief, is that right? They have to come pick it up. within-
Yeah, within
yeah,
72 hours. They have to
Right.
pick it up.
And so
It is very expensive.
probably $80 a day if they don't pick it up. So that's where that comes from.
Wow.
Which is why I think it was a big deal that, they wanted, because people who are victims of.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I know,
Yeah.
but, and it's unfortunate that I have to say his name, but, Councilmember Marcano, before he left, he had talked about, this is why I was curious about these numbers, he had talked about if there was something that we could do, if there was a piece of land, we could lay a slab of concrete, do something on our own, where we could potentially hold these vehicles that are specifically, picked up from that are recovered from vehicle theft. I think now may be the time that we potentially look at that. I mean, the city has some land, and I think, spending that kind of money now might be the time maybe that we look into pouring a slab of concrete and figuring out how vehicles specifically recovered for motor vehicle theft, we figure out how to hold those on our own, because this seems like a lot of money for me. So
It's
just something on
challenging,
my
I will be
to-do
honest with you
list.
though, because most departments do contract out to tow services and to tow companies and tow yards to maintain the vehicles, because you do have to have staffing issues, security issues. Again, we do have impound personnel that are already assigned out of limited number of resources that we have.
Yeah, they're out at the lot.
Yeah. Yep.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
as you know, Mr. Schneebeck from the police department did a report when Councilmember Marcano brought that resolution.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to revisit. You want me to have,
Yeah.
put it on the next agenda?
Yeah, can we just revisit that? And I'm not thinking of anything huge, right? I mean, if in 1 month it was 86 vehicles
20,000.
recovered, yeah, if I mean, to me, I don't think that we even need to look at anything that's huge. You know, we don't need 1,000 parking spaces, you know, to fit into this. So I just think, yeah, if we could revisit that, because when I had seen some of these numbers, to me, I think it's time that we revisit that.
We'll get it on the April agenda.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember, just so you're aware too, though, with the other vehicles that we're impounding, because on the vehicle registration ordinance, again, that, I think that's important too.
Yeah.
I have the numbers for that. So for November of 24, we had 195. In December of 24, we had 177. January, we had 135. February, we had 131 for a total of 638 vehicles.
Yeah,
That was taken for the impound for no reg, no license, and expired plates.
yes.
So that's also the
Great.
combination of vehicles that are gonna be, you know, incorporated into this, not with the payment back of it, but just the maintaining of the vehicles that come in.
Well, those vehicles can still go to M&M.
Yeah,
As far
and that's
as
if you wanted to, if you wanted to do
Yeah.
a bifurcated system or something
Yeah.
like that.
Those
that's-
ones-
Now that we looked at that,
Those
then-
ones can still go to M&M because those were impounded because they didn't have
Right.
license, registration, insurance. So those, I would say, could still go to M&M and they need to pay to get those vehicles out. I mean, these small numbers, 86 vehicles, you know, that we're, you know, paying all this money for. The ones that are picked up on stolen vehicle recoveries. I think that's where we maybe need to look at, revisit, with, John Schneebeck, maybe we revisit that and look at that. The rest of those can still go to M&M.
Yeah, we had looked at that. So yeah, let's see what a smaller,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, please, if we could, I would like to, because I was kind of looking at that in the backup and thought, holy cow. For me, that's all I had for consent, so we can go into item 4A, general business.
Madam Chair, you want to, those who move forward.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yeah, we can move,
Created 3G.
staff move the consent items forward.
Yes.
Okay. So we will go on to item 4A, 2025 wildland update.
Good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this. Obviously, we got quite a few questions after the Palisades fires about, you know, how is the city prepared to navigate this? Several questions from individual council members and a lot of good feedback and conversation and dialogue. But we thought it would be really good just to kind of provide you a little bit of an overview of the city's preparedness for wildland events, as well as some of the emergency management components that come along with preparedness, response, and recovery for our community members after an event. And so this morning, I've got Division Chief Steve Wright and then Assistant Chief Hunter Hackbarth, who will be doing the presentation, if that's okay with you, ma'am. And we'll move it forward. And we will try to keep it within our 15 minutes of
Yeah.
allotted time.
20 minutes.
She's starting the time.
Good morning. I'm gonna sneak in here for, this feels more comfortable for me.
Yeah, great.
Go ahead, Inez. So, yeah, this conversation, I think, got brought up recently because of the LA fires. As this room probably experienced a lot of community outreach, wondering how our community would react to something like this. So, it's broken down into these three phases where we have the community risk reduction piece that tries to prepare the community for an incident like this, and then how we respond when there is an incident, and then how the community shows short and long-term resiliency moving on after a incident. So I'm gonna quickly, these next couple of slides aren't the best visual for what I'm about to discuss, but one of the pieces, and I'm sure council and the mayor are familiar with this, is that we have the ability to enact a fire ban depending on conditions. Part of what goes into that are three metrics that gauge the fuel moisture in a certain square feet, and then the energy released by that fuel. And as those metrics reach thresholds, we then come to the conclusion to possibly enact a fire ban. So I'm gonna just, this is an example of what council and the mayor see from the fire chief. If there is a fire ban, it's communication that goes out that discusses how we came to this conclusion and how we're moving forward with the fire ban. So one of the metrics is the 100-hour fuel, which is 100 square feet, and its moisture content. Then another metrics is how much energy is being released by the vegetation in our community. We get all this from CU Boulder meteorology scientists. They have areas in the entire state that they monitor and then report to the municipalities the condition. And then there's other factors besides metrics that go into a fire ban. One of them is the state conditions, obviously decrees from the governor. He can make a statewide fire ban, but then we also monitor the drought conditions. We look to what our neighbors are doing in Arapahoe County, Adams County, what they've experienced and what they're decreeing with their fire ban, and put all that together and go from there. There's 3 stages to our Aurora fire ban. One of them is stage 1. We're always in it, and it basically revolves around fireworks are illegal until the municipal code says the window opens up, which is June 15th to July 5th. And as you all know, we have lots of discussions leading up to July 4th about fireworks and their legality. Then from there, stage 2 restricts, as you see, model rockets and bonfires and recreational fires. Then we get on to stage 3, and that just elevates basically even your backyard installed commercial fireplace would be banned to use, even LPG tanks. So smoking in public, it becomes an issue when we get to stage 3. The last I can recall reaching something like this, if anyone in this room can remember, was 2020, COVID, extreme state drought, civil unrest. We got to this level of restriction. Now I'm gonna show you a handout of kind of mitigation efforts we try and do to prepare the community. This is information that goes to HOAs and metro districts, and it explains the issues with maintaining property and grass height and distance from structures and issues with dead trees, and asks these communities to participate in mitigating their landscape to prevent a wildfire issue in their community. So this front and back, so you can, and they get that handed to them, sent to them, and then we also meet with HOAs to explain that. We have a community risk reduction section that is kind of houses the fire marshal and fire investigators and fire inspectors, and also a community educator who will go out to an HOA and explain the risks. We reference code and distances to guide them on assessing their own property. Some examples, so then we have the issue of city-owned properties and how we keep them safe. So last summer, the fire department teamed up with pros and the water department to assess 4 city properties that were deemed to have potential risk issues regarding wildfire. What came of that conclusion is a pretty robust document with pictures and guidance and suggestions for our city-owned properties, which that went to the water department and pros and the fire department to work on mitigating these properties. As many of you in this room, and I'm looking at the mayor, know, we get a lot of this coming from the community up to us, concerned about their properties. We've gone and had to walk some properties, and what has been the outcome of that is, I'll use Hutchinson Channel as an example of the property we walked. Last summer, the fire department with pros and water went out there and felled dead trees and mowed tall grasses an appropriate length from structures and mitigated that risk. And that is a good example of how city leaders, different city departments, and the fire department have to work together to keep our community resilient from wildfire risk. Now we'll get into if we have an unfortunate incident in the community, how our fire will respond. The fire department has a specialty team. In my purview is special operations, which is probably a piece of why I'm up here. And we do have a wildland team. The wildland team, its resources have 5 brush trucks, which are the pickup looking vehicles, and then 1 Type 3 engine. A Type 3 engine looks like a fire truck. It's a little smaller and it can go off-road and into the vegetation to protect houses and put out wildfire. This last bullet point is kind of how I perceive our ideal resource allotment for this community. So that would be increasing some of these capabilities.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, go.
So you're saying we need 3 Type 3 trucks?
Yes, that would be
Because now we
ideal.
only have 1, right?
Correct. And those are the fire truck like ones.
Yeah, and why are you saying, what's the rationale for 3 versus 2?
With our growth and our risk in the communities we have, one thing I think is underserved in our city is the Type 3, the fire truck. That's really what would be used to protect homes. So the pickup type is what would go out and try and maintain it where it's at. But as they encroach on our homes, the Type 3s, and you really would want 1 Type 3 per house.
Okay.
So if you see what LA as an example, if we had more than 3 homes, I would actually like more than 3 Type 3s, but I try not to get too greedy.
Okay.
So moving on.
Chief would like to.
Just a little bit, a couple of those bullet points. One is we recognize the resource constraints and certainly understand that. And we've had the opportunity to submit some grant requests for this to try and get funding for these resources. The other thing is really when you look at risk and you look at the outcomes that we're looking for, started to set this standard. Right now, we have a standard of trying to confine residential fires to the room or object of origin 90% of the time. And really the goal is to keep these small, right? Because if you can catch them early and you can catch them when they're small, before they literally create their own weather system, you have the opportunity to keep it from becoming something, the level of significance as they experienced in California or the Marshall Fire or whatever. So that is one of the reasons that we talk about first in unit response, and then we talk about having the right resources in the right place at the right time, which is where we've got that 90% of the time we want to confine it to 1 acre or less. To do that, we need a deployment model that puts those resources in the right places so they can respond quickly to those and help mitigate that. So we're not, this isn't an ask of you, we're trying to define several different avenues to try and get that. And Jason's been very receptive to that.
You guys applied for those grants quite some time ago now. It seems like, do we have any update?
We do not.
We don't have any
We don't have
update?
any updates on the AFG. Now, these are federal grants.
Yeah.
That we're applying for. So, I don't really know what the timeline is for those right now, but we have no updates at this time. And we've talked a little bit about the safer grants for other projects. We don't even have, that hasn't even opened yet. We're not sure when that's gonna open. We've got no communication about those federal grants.
But the federal grants, did we at least receive communication that they've received it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so they have received it.
So they have received it, and right now, the determination, I think, is paused as all of the federal programs are being
Right.
reviewed.
Okay, but they have received it. Okay. Okay.
And I believe I touch on the grant a little later, but if I don't, in that FEMA grant, we are asking for a Type 3 engine, equipment and mobile radio capabilities to basically repeaters that can be placed out in rural areas to help us communicate on the radios. There is a state Colorado Wildfire Protection Plan, which is a document that municipalities can send to the state to outline their wildland risk and their community demographics. And it gets approved by the state, and that then enables the municipality to have state agreed upon or approved resources. If they agree that, yes, this is your community and this is its risk. And Aurora does sit in a relatively high risk for wildfire, just button up to the plains like we do and our growth. So we have one of those submitted and approved with the state that we piggybacked with Arapahoe County on. Aurora has Arapahoe County, Adams County, and then we're our municipality, as you guys know. So we are working on one individually just for the city of Aurora. But right now we are tied in with Arapahoe County, which is a huge part of our risk assessment, that area.
I have one question about that, just real quick, with Arapahoe County, because I think part of, unincorporated Arapahoe County are very, very susceptible to wildland fires, maybe even more so than what I'm seeing here. Who, with that wildland land mitigation, whose responsibility? Is that South Metro?
That would
South
be,
Metro mitigates unincorporated. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys work with South
yeah,
Metro on
mutual aid.
that. Okay,
We mutual aid with them to their areas, they would mutual aid with ours.
I got it.
Also, to answer your question, Douglas County
Yeah.
would have,
Oh,
we-
right.
regarding wildland, has resources to provide for that.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to understand that.
And that tab to the right, it explains in more detail kind of what I'm talking about with the partnership with the state. So it just establishes agreed upon risk in our area with the state.
Okay.
So when we ask for 2 fixed planes to come to a drop of retardant, they already know that that's appropriate for our community and our risk.
Great, okay.
This is what that would provide. The state is broken up by the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. They break the state up into their own sections, if you will, that don't apply to counties or municipalities. So we are in their Battalion 13. We have a mutual aid agreement with them. And with that brings air support. And then to the point about the unincorporated, Douglas County does have a helicopter for wildland that can fly at a moment's notice. Requested by Aurora or South Metro. Our specific wildland team, it's comprised of roughly 55 members. We do upstaff the community on red flag days, which we were close today as an example, which means high winds. We have this storm coming in, and I know it's still technically winter, but it's today's 60 degrees and 60-mile-an-hour winds. And LA had their fire in January, February due to winds. So as you guys all know, we did deploy some of our specialty team members to Los Angeles. There's kind of 2 roles our specialty team members play in that they are housed at Station 13 to serve this community for wildland risk. They also individually can get their federal qualifications to a standard where they can be deployed at the fire chief's approval to help serve other communities when they have incidences. And that's what happened in Los Angeles. If there's anything I could pass on from the California incidences recently, and as we talk about applying for grants and the members we have that are specialized in this risk, is that if something large happens, there really isn't enough resource. If California didn't have it, that no one is. And it really points to the need for the community residents to harden their properties from the risk. The city leader to prioritize properties that need to be mitigated so we don't have an incident. And then, as Chief said, really our goal, which is what we focus on, is to get there quick, because that's our best hope to put it out. Yes, sir.
So, where are juniper trees kind of, unique in terms of, spreading fire? And if so, I believe we've had presentations before, what are we doing to communicate to the public about that?
Yeah, in our community, so, and I think we might have talked about this with the citizen that we walk. Their biggest risk is being unkept, overgrown. When you see them down touching the ground and spread out 10 feet. And we really recommend every tree be trimmed 8 feet up.
Okay.
And if they're dead, be removed. What happens with junipers is unkept. Like if you look at some of our apartment complexes with them right up against the building, overgrown, unkept, unirrigated and dry, and all those pine needles and all that rift. If they're trimmed up 8 feet and irrigated, they're not nearly as risky. They're notorious in Aurora, just my 20+ years, we've had a lot of juniper cause. And not always wildland, our apartment complexes have a lot of them. It's because they're overgrown and out of control, and that just causes a huge, dry, large risk.
So just to kind of piggyback on that, I think, because I get a lot of emails, I don't know if you guys do, but I get a lot of emails about code enforcement, quote, harassing homeowners over their trees. Maybe that's not being communicated, that the reason we get so strict about trees is for, fire mitigation.
Mhm.
Maybe if fire could speak with code enforcement and we could better communicate that. Because I know that a lot of constituents just kind of feel like they're being harassed about their tree, and their tree provides shade and
They
this,
think
and
it's an
don't-
aesthetic,
They
yeah.
think it's aesthetic, they
Yeah.
think it's providing, and they don't understand that. So if that is tied in, I think maybe fire should communicate with code enforcement, and maybe code enforcement can better relay that to homeowners.
Yeah.
about their trees.
I'll work on that, because that's exactly where our community risk reduction section crosses over with other city departments, and they work
Yeah.
with code a lot on various things, so that shouldn't be a hard
Okay, yeah, I
channel
think
to-
that would be good.
Yeah, I
I've
agree.
never had a homeowner tell me that code enforcement is telling them they need to trim their tree for fire reasons. So I think that would be good.
Before we move into the recovery piece of it, thank you, Steve. I just want to touch on a couple of things, a couple of observations that I've made. One, the wildland team are committed and they're experts in their craft. They are very, very good. These deployments, where we go to LA, we've been up north within the state, we've been to New Mexico. Since I've been here in 2 years, I've been here, been to New Mexico, been to Texas, been to North Carolina, been to Virginia. The experience that they get there at no cost to the city, that they can bring back here in the event that we have a major event, as well as the goodwill that we build with those jurisdictions where we're providing assistance in their time of need, pays incredible dividends for us from the experience that they gain there at no cost. I mean, it's like real world training for free.
Yeah.
And then the relationships they build, they can bring that back. It really makes us a better organization when we're responding to these things. The other thing I would point out related to mitigation, part of the challenge in the fire services community risk reduction is really difficult to measure, right? So how do you measure and prove things that didn't happen? And when we talk about hardening your home, it's a suggestion, right? In a lot of ways, we have limited ability to enforce whether or not people actually care for their trees and things like that, outside of commercial and properties and things like that. So
Well, we can with residential, so usually if we're enforcing on a tree, just to go back to that, it is dead or more than 50% dead, which then becomes a fire risk. So we can work on what that says on the notification to sort of explain the why. But for commercial, we do have landscape plans, like full landscape plans for commercial, that then we do keep to the site plan and hold people accountable to more specifically.
and so a lot of people will become complacent, right? It's not gonna happen here. It's not gonna happen
Oh,
to
of
me.
course, yeah.
And even in fire prone areas like California, people fail to harden their properties and protect themselves from ladder fuels, right? Things that are gonna take it from the fire that's coming up to your property and then transfer that to the structure, right? And so complacency is a big deal. And I think that's really why we're intentional about creating messaging around what was happening there. We're not insulated from that here. And as Steve pointed out, we have an elevated risk with the wildland urban interface here, and especially with some of the winds. So I just wanted to share that with you before we moved on to Hunter's presentation. So thank you for letting me share that.
3 quick slides just to talk about what happens after we have the event. So we talked a little bit about recovery and the Office of Emergency Management working within the city and that cycle of a large scale emergency. So the Chief just talked about mitigation. What have we done to try to prevent this from happening? When it does happen, so we mitigate, we prepare, we respond, and then after that response, what does recovery look like? And you can even look at as simple as the most recent heavy snowstorm we had. I live in Northwest Aurora, a significant amount of trees down, snow to move around. Even a small event like that has a recovery and a mitigation phase. So how do we get back to normalcy? How does the city agency come together to mitigate the trees that are down that are blocking roadways or city-owned trees? So how do we work that together? Go ahead. And then when we get into recovery, it's really about the community lifelines. So we've had a significant event. How do we, you saw in LA, they had people going in and looting. So how does the police department become engaged in security and keeping people out of the area? They even had people who bought their own fire truck and fire gear and were going in as firefighters, burglarizing houses. And luckily it was firefighters that realized they weren't real firefighters that then brought in LA County Sheriff to make an arrest. So how do we secure the properties? How do we make sure there's food, water, shelter? So how do we provide that sheltering? Making sure there's proper medical care. Working with XL, so especially Northwest Aurora, older parts of Aurora, where we have above ground power lines. How are we working with our energy partners to come in and restore power? Make sure that people have power, the grocery stores, the businesses have power, so we don't lose the food sources. We don't lose the medical facilities. We don't lose all those things. Communications, both 911, our responder communications, mass transit or transportation, working with our partners to make sure the roadways are open. You get a flooding event, and what happens like 56th Avenue, a one evening flooding event, and we lost a major roadway due to flooding. So how do we work around that? How do we make sure we can still respond? Any hazmat, and then making sure that our water system is intact and delivering to the community. Go ahead. One last one, then we get, so this is, we're moving into short-term recovery. So we're working with our partners in the county, state, and feds. We'll go out and look for emergency declaration. We'll work with the county and the state. What kind of disaster assistance centers will we set up? Financial tracking is a huge one. If you remember the floods, Rod, how long ago was that? 15 years ago, where we had that big 3-day rain event. There was a significant amount of city-owned facilities and equipment that were damaged in the flood responses. And by good, solid financial tracking, we were able to work with our state and federal partners through the city to get reimbursement. So making sure that we are doing really good financial tracking, getting out into the community, doing a damage assessment, working with the private entities, the insurance companies, those people to make sure we're doing good assessments. Making sure our community is getting behavioral health and or safety care. So some of these disasters are significant, especially a fire where they've lost everything. How do we help support them through our community partners in behavioral health? Go ahead. So that's short term. Then we would push in a large scale event. These would be the components. So how are we going to rebuild our infrastructure? How are we going to make sure we don't have an economic loss? We're very fortunate, big city. We can absorb some community losses better than some smaller. So you lose a grocery store. We're fortunate we have more grocery stores. or we lose a mall, we still have other opportunities for shopping, but how do we make sure those, where are we gonna put residents? So displaced residents, do we have enough housing, enough of, open apartments, enough open hotel rooms? Where are we gonna put people if we need to displace them because of a major disaster? Health and environmental damage, criminal activity, the community, this becomes a problem, strangely enough. The community wants to step up and help. And usually what happens is the city is overwhelmed by how much love they get, and they can't manage the massive amount of donations they get because it's just too much. So how do you make sure within the city we can manage donation, cost reimbursement, which is through good financial tracking, and then talking about behavioral health and economic assistance to get those businesses back up. Los Angeles, you look at Palisades, they lost, other than that one shopping district, they lost almost every other business in that town. That town burned, except for one private shopping area that actually brought in private fire protection. They were able to save that, but the rest of that town, they lost everything. So how do we make sure we're working with our economic and business partners so that they can get back on their feet and then serve their community? So that is it for this presentation. Any questions from me?
I have a very random question for you. It's too personal. You don't have to answer it, but you mentioned if we lose a grocery store in the community, do we have other grocery stores? You also mentioned you live in Northwest Aurora. Where do you go grocery shopping?
So I go grocery shopping either at the Safeway on Havana, the King Soopers on Havana, the King Soopers at 6th and Peoria. So I live at 5th and Jamaica,
Okay,
so 6th and Havana.
yeah.
So those are my shopping centers. That's where I do the bulk of mine, or I go to Costco on Havana.
All
And
right.
I do all my shopping at 7-Elevens.
Yeah, we can't lose that.
No other comments, please?
I was just curious personally, because we talk a lot about grocery stores in Northwest Aurora, and when you mentioned grocery stores and that you live in Northwest Aurora, I'm just gonna ask this man where he grocery shops. Thank you.
It depends on what my wife and her family is interested in. I was shopping at the Mercado up on Colfax.
Yeah,
Because my wife wanted very specific stuff for pozole,
Yeah.
and that's where you go shopping when you want
okay.
legit pozole. So yeah, that's,
I appreciate that answer. Thank
Yeah, you're
you.
welcome.
I was curious.
Chime in on something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Obviously, a couple partners to bring to the table on this wildfire would be the water department. We asked in a recent meeting if there was enough fire hydrant pressure, if a lot of those fire hydrants were tapped into. We got kind of a roundabout answer on it. Are you pretty confident that there's a supply of water and enough pressure?
I'm more confident in this infrastructure that we have here with our water department than I was in my previous location. I think they've done a really good job. They are continuing. We did a dry run of our ISO process because we're ISO 11X. And so in advance of any kind of visit from the insurance or Verisk, who does the insurance service organization or office ratings, we need to go through 50% of that score is your water distribution system. It's not just your fire department, it's your 911 center, it's how they close investigations, it's your fire response infrastructure. But they have to provide updated modeling about their pressures in all parts of their system. And usually Verisk is interested in things like dead end hydrants, right? Where there's just one pipe that feeds that hydrant as opposed to a loop system. And water was spot on with their distribution model, their flow testing, all those kinds of things. So I'm very, very confident. The challenge where we're challenged is where that infrastructure doesn't exist. And so when you look at what I call the frontier, right, where we're developing, we're sort of out kicking our coverage in some of those areas. And then where we have access to water is a little more limited. And that impacts our ability to respond quickly and get to that 90% confinement, or confinement to 1 acre 90% of the time. So I'm very confident. Water does a fantastic job. We work very closely with them. Even on the Colfax fire, we were in communication with them to help boost pressures and try and get us a little bit more pressure on those hydrants since we had so many lines flowing. So, yeah, long answer to your short question. I have a lot of confidence in that organization and the infrastructure around it.
A second partner would be Parks and Recreation, open space. I think we do a little mowing next to homes along some of these canal corridors and so forth. And you identified 4 major grassland areas, one of which Sand Creek Plains Conservation Center. This is kind of a unique mitigation, but I think they've used like goats and donkeys out there and it kind of, how about some goats and donkeys in Francois' word?
I would love that. I live there and I would like goats and donkeys and I will fight Francois for goats and donkeys if I have to.
But
I will vote them down.
mitigation,
All through the efforts of fire mitigation.
I think if we could have anybody walk away from this presentation with anything is that, there's a couple of things. One is everybody's got a role in protecting their own property, right?
Yeah.
And, we don't want to be everywhere saying, you have to do this and that, but it really does matter. And even if your neighbor is not mitigating, that impacts your home, right? So it's a community effort to try and reduce the risk in our neighborhoods. And so that's one thing I would offer. The other is the expectation setting, really. CAL FIRE is the best in the country at navigating these types of fires, and that happened to them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe 20 years behind where CAL FIRE is with coordination and statewide response. And I know that Mike Morgan is doing a lot of work to bring us up to where we need to be. We talk a lot about mutual aid, statewide mutual aid. He's taken some heat over these helicopters, but those are going to be a huge resource for municipalities and districts all around the state because the way the state's organizing it is going to come at no cost to the municipality or the district. So we can get that resource coming early without worrying about the fact that it costs $10,000 a minute or whatever it is, some crazy astronomical fee to get these helicopters to come do airdrops. So those kinds of things are starting to be built within the state, but it's not up to the level that I think we would, as fire service organizations, like it to be, and nor is it where I think DFC, Division of Fire Prevention Control wants it to be. So I think when it gets that big, it becomes really, really difficult for any fire department across the United States to manage. That's why the federal wildland program is so important. Because that's what we participate in when we deploy, and that's who we're going to call for help. We're going to call for help from the state. We're going to call for help from the federal resources. And that's how we end up getting these really large fires under control. So I just don't want to overset the expectations that, we can handle anything that comes our way at any time. I think we need to be realistic and say that we have a significant wildland risk in the city. We have very, very well-trained and people who would go out and attack it, but there are always events that will get outside of what we can control within our own set of resources. So relationship building is crucial with our neighbors for mutual aid, with our statewide partners for mutual aid, and with our federal partners for mutual aid. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to item 4B, crime strategy presentation.
Thank you. What you're going to see, and I think both of you have already seen a presentation, kind of a really light version of this. This is much more extensive, and I'm going to kind of give you a view. Some of the things you're going to think, well, how does this really relate to crime? But it's all interconnected as we go through this. So if you can go to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. Our focus area, again, what we do in law enforcement, our primary mission is to fight crime. That is it. And that's what I am focused on. But with that also comes the aspects of community, organizational sustainability, and officer wellness. How are we doing that? The framework that we have based and put into Aurora Police Department right now is evidence-based. Evidence-based policing comes from a professor. It's Professor Sherman. He basically said that evidence-based policing should be the same as medical-based policing. There's certain ways that you impact medical issues. You do a hip replacement the same way. They found out that this is how it's done. That's what you look at when you talk about evidence-based policing. It's being able to articulate out through data, through information, that the strategies that you're implementing are having an impact or they're not having an impact. And so it's very focused. The other aspect is constitutional policing. Again, that is a huge aspect that we talk about, we focus on. When you look at the Constitution, when you look at the first 3 articles of the Constitution, it talks about the judicial, the legislation, and the executive. When you look at the laws related specifically in the amendments in the Constitution, when you look at the first When you look at the fourth specifically, that talks about search and seizure. Again, that search and seizure relates not only to homes, but it also relates to an individual. When you get involved in a use of force, that has to be justified as it is objectively reasonable based upon what the officers know. So again, all these strategies are related to what we're going to focus on. If you go to the first slide, please. On crime, I broke everything down into Q1s through Q4. Basically, we're looking at a quarter for this year to trying to strategically understand how can we impact crime the best and what can we do. And so I'm going to kind of go through it, but obviously our objective is to reduce crime while enhancing public safety using these evidence-based practices. And when we looked at it for Q1, that's exactly what we wanted to do. I wanted to start to really focus on the crime analysis process. And so we had discussions. I broke it down into 3 sections. There's what's known as the near term, the midterm, and then the far term. Near term is what's known as hotspot policing, where you're actually identifying the locations that are the most problematic. That can come through information related to calls for service. It can come through anecdotal information from community groups, or it can come from arrest and any kind of data that relates to a specific location. So what you do is you analyze that, and then you look at the resources that you want to put on that, and then you measure what exactly has been going on, what's been occurring, how has it been occurring, and then what is the impact that the officers, that strategies, that the implications of what the department has done has impacted it. So that was a big part of it first, is understanding that. The second part is what's known as midterm. Midterm is a place-based approach. Again, so I'll use the Dallas apartments as a place-based approach. You identified that there was a problem in there. You identified that it was a particular place. You identified the reasons for those problems were based upon a lot of the activity that was occurring, the gang activity, which you fight on is from crime aspect. But then also there was major issues related to how those places were managed, the companies. And so you focus on a place base of what can you do to modify it. The closure is an example of that. A long-term strategy is what's known as intervention prevention. So when you look at Aurora Save, when you look at the outreach, when you look at the Operation Ceasefire that we did, that Mayor, you attended, again, we had 3 individuals that were sitting in that chairs for that ceasefire. And out of those 3 individuals, believe it or not, they were involved in over 25 different shootings in the city of Aurora. And so it doesn't look like a big number. You put a lot of effort into it. You have a lot of people come and talk. But when you think of those 3 individuals that were involved, somehow connected to 25 different shootings, it speaks volumes about the intervention, the prevention, trying to give alternatives, trying to let them know that, hey, you continue on this path, law enforcement is going to be incredibly proactive towards you, but you also have an opportunity to get out of it.
I'm sorry, but this was a real thing? You found 3 individuals that were involved in over 25 shootings?
Connected to it, yeah, somehow
And you
connected.
found them out of the Dallas Street Apartments?
No, 2 separate
Oh.
things.
Okay.
This is what's known as Operation Ceasefire.
Okay.
Yeah, the Ceasefire is another program that we're instituting. It's in depth.
Calling it the call-in.
The
So
call-in.
maybe that's the
Yeah,
confusion
the
there.
call.
So place-based, and then the next strategy
Yeah.
was the safe piece.
The,
Yeah.
the call-ins come from the John Jay College. It actually comes from National Network for Safe Communities. It was originated by a professor who's known as David Kennedy.
Okay.
And again, they're, whether you call them call-ins or Operation Ceasefires, whatever it is,
Okay.
they're throughout the country.
Oh, so this wasn't just, this wasn't in Aurora? We
No,
found
this wasn't Aurora. We did a
Oh, it
call-in.
wasn't Aurora, okay.
Yeah, we did a call-in where we called in 3 individuals.
Oh, wow.
And the individuals are picked based upon the fact that they have a high propensity for violence, either
Okay.
killing themselves or being killed by somebody else.
Okay.
So those individuals were called in. And so now you track those individuals, you follow those individuals up and monitor them.
25 shootings. Are they insured then? Are
Are
they
they what?
incarcerated?
No, because they had, again, they're connected in somehow, but they hadn't been filed on, they hadn't been in the process. They were identified as high risk.
Okay.
And so that's how you identify them. That's how you call them in. And then we monitor them to see if they are still involved in it or if they have taken other alternatives or other paths to get out of gang activity.
Okay.
And that is the whole purpose of what call-ins are. That's what the whole purpose of intervention is.
Gotcha.
And that's the aspect of the long term. So when I talk about near, mid, and then far, because near, you got to get busy. Places out of control, you got to get in there, you got to focus on it.
Yeah.
The mid is we have a chance to look at it. What is holistically causing these issues and these problems? You know, is it lighting? Is it structures? Is it management? Those are the things. And then the long term is about looking at the individuals and then seeing what you can do to prevent their activities from continuing to occur.
I got
So those are the strategies that we focused on.
Okay.
Sorry about bringing your blood pressure up there.
Yeah,
but
I-
We're in a better place. So again, these are the things I looked at for each of the things for Q2. Again, we're looking at academic institutions to bring in information. So again, David Kennedy, the person I talked about, I have contact with him continually. A lot of stuff I've worked with him in past agencies. Targeted campaigns on violence. Again, that's what we are looking at. Strategic strat in Q3, we're focusing on, again, getting the real-time crime center. We just have that now started. And again, pretty soon, I'm hoping within a month or so, we're going to have our legs under it and have it staffed. And again, I hope you guys get the chance to come up there and take a look at it once we get it up and going. I don't want to show you right now because it looks really nice, but we're still navigating how to use it the best. It's not just the most out of it.
Is that gonna be at headquarters or at District 3 where dispatch
It's
is?
at headquarters.
It's gonna be at headquarters, okay.
And then for Q4, again, we're looking at crime strategies, benchmarks to adjust strategies and overall. What I wanted to, if you go to the next slide real quick, please. Thank you very much. This is the PAC report. This shows our crime trends. And again, this is a really interesting thing because it does show what is occurring. Like right now, for an example, last year at this time, we had 2,668 crimes that were anywhere between murder, sex assault, aggravated assault, robberies, burglaries, motor vehicle thefts, and larcenies. This year at this time, we have 2,062. So we have a decrease of 606. We're at a 22.7% decrease in crime right now across the board. As a matter of fact, our aggravated assaults were down 29. Our shootings were down 16. Shootings where bullet hit flesh were down 5. Our homicides were down 4. So these numbers tell the story of what's happening, but they don't tell the story of how we get there. And so that was a cultural shift that we did within the organization. So when we focus, remember I talked about hotspot policing as the near-term strategy. This is just an example of that. So this is up in District 1. And so the District 1 commander identified a location that was bad, identified it through calls for service, through crime activity, through a lot of different things. Before, all we looked at was just the crime, just the numbers. But there was no accountability component for the commanders to say, okay, these are the locations that I've identified that are the worst. These are how we're going to focus on them. And then again, when you talk about evidence-based policing, it's about, can we validate if what our actions are doing are having an impact on that crime or not?
Mhm.
So this is an example. We do our crime meetings every Wednesday.
Mhm.
And so this is what the commander, actually Mike Gaskell, put together. And this is what focused when you talk about that hotspot. This is the trends and patterns it shows. And so what it shows is he identified a particular location. It's geo-fenced up there with the map. It shows what the incidences were, what the problems were. It was violent crime. And then on this other side with the blue, it shows what were the calls for service, how many were initiated by the officers, how many were initiated by community members, what was the response, what was the arrest, and then what was the ultimate impact. And we also looked at the hours that were deployed. So how many hours did DART deploy? How many hours did patrol deploy? What did PAR do? And then on the bottom right there, you see productivity or clearance. So what happened? And that was something that was really never tracked before. So we were really never able to measure what the officers did, or if they were doing anything at all. We got a great department here, but we didn't know what they were doing because nothing was codified. You couldn't look at the data. You couldn't say, okay, if what they did have an impact to that particular event or crime. So that's what this does. And so this will be up. And then as this process continues, the commander will evaluate and say, hey, these actions that we did, these traffic summons, these criminal summons, these vehicles that were towed, the warrants, the arrest, the contacts with individuals, the high visibility patrol, did they have an impact or did they not have an impact? And so that's what is an example of hotspot policing. And all 3 districts are doing exactly the same thing now. They've identified locations, their 3 most problematic areas, and then they're putting their resources based on that. And then they go to the next one and the next one and the next one based upon what they are. So it's not just a random thing, but it's actually specifically and strategically looking at the most problematic locations and then focusing on those and then seeing what the results are ultimately going to be.
Yeah, you're being very humble, Chief, because I will tell you what the reason is why the numbers are down 22% or 27% or whatever it is that you said from this time last year to today. And it's specifically because of your leadership. We do have a wonderful police department, but the men and women of the police department are wonderful. I'm convinced they were always doing this work. But there was no data and there was no leadership who was focused on crime, which was on your very first slide. So you're being very humble. But a lot of this is reflective of specifically your leadership and fighting crime.
It's very nice. And again, we have a really good group of people that are really committed to this.
I agree.
Without process. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is an example of some things, again, it's not just patrol focused, but we wanted to measure what actually were the other entities doing because a lot of that was not being captured. And so again, we looked at the total deployments of SWAT on K9. This talks about the arrest. It actually gives validation of what they are doing, how they are doing it. Again, even the SWAT deployments, we've modified the SWAT's actions, what they're doing and what they're not doing. We took down a lot of the lower hanging search warrants and things like that were being handled by SWAT. To be honest with you, they should not have been handled by SWAT. SWAT is for a very specific task. SWAT has a very specific role to handle high-risk search warrants, not low-hanging fruit search warrants that detectives could do. That in the culture of Aurora was something that the detectives were not doing. They weren't handling the low-hanging search warrants, like for property or for evidence or a knock and talk to somebody to get a T-shirt that might have been used in a crime. SWAT was doing all of the search warrants. And so that was something I think that they almost felt that they were validating their position through quantity as opposed to quality. And so we changed that and again, I want them for a specific role. And that in turn started to allow the DART teams and the PAR teams and the detectives to start doing more search warrants and planning more. If you go to the next slide, but that's an example of that. And then also we looked at the traffic section. Again, how do we measure success? That was one big thing that I wanted to really be able to have this department be able to tell its own story. And a lot of that wasn't being measured. Tickets were being written, things were being done, but we never had an idea of how much or what was the impact and where was that activity going. And so as you can see, we broke down the numbers of citations, of crash reports, DUI incidences, hit and runs, fatalities and everything else. And we keep a total that goes for the year. So now when we look at traffic sections, if you go to the next slide, please. So this will show again, some of the registration, some of the summons that we talked about. Again, this was something that was not really specifically measured. It wasn't looked at. And then we look at the race, the ethnicity to make sure that with the summons registration and the traffic enforcement that goes with that, are we hitting a particular group, a particular race, a particular ethnicity? And that's something I wanted to really be able to fight right away. Actually, Mayor, before I was even hired, we had this conversation when this thing just rolled out. And so that was an example where it shows this is who's being stopped for vehicle registrations. It's not one particular group. The measurement of the data, the capturing of this, it tells the story. And that to me is really, really important. You go to the next slide, please. For community, again, these are the things that we hope to achieve, and this is without part still a major component of the crime fighting strategy is the relationships. And so we broke down what we were doing as far as the community in Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. Basically, it's about listening. It's about cultural competencies. It's about how we're training our officers. If you go into Q2, it's about guiding principles, programs, decision makings, partners with local organizations, homeless, mental health. That's something that we're still dealing with and collaborating with. Non-speaking English communities, again, how do we reach into them in Q4? All of these things are what we said is milestones so that we can evaluate them and look at them as the year goes on. If you could go to the next slide, please. Organizational sustainability is our third goal. And again, it's about efficiency of the organization. How are we running allocation of resources for the first one, looking at leadership programs. We have a lot of our personnel now going to programs outside of Aurora. We also wanted to get a 3-year sustainability or a strategic plan. And so that is on the work right now. That will be coming out very soon to look at the long-term impact of the department, the organization, where we want to go. These are all the initiatives that we are going to focus on throughout the year. The one big aspect when you look at organizational sustainability is how are we staffed? How are we managed? That is without question something that we are still contending with and dealing with. And again, I never will wave the white flag and say, oh, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough staff. We will do what we have to do. But the idea, the component of saying, hey, you're going to have to do more with less, that's a ridiculous statement. That's not functional. It's not achievable. And so staffing without question for us is a major part of that. If you could go to the next slide, please. I looked at the national average. Again, actually, this came out of a report when we were discussing our strategic plan and their infrastructure of how many stations or how many locations or how we want to frame it. What you'll see is on the top, you'll see a national average of sworn per 1,000. So again, the population of 1,000, the national average somewhere now is right around 2.4 or above. That's the national average. When you look at the Colorado average of officers to population, right now in Colorado, it's at about 2.3. When you look at the Aurora average of officers per 1,000 population, We are down below 1.7 probably right about now. So we are nowhere near staffing levels that would be considered for any other organization across the nation or any other organization in Colorado. So again, this isn't something that's like, hey, we got to get this. This is something I hope it's just knowledge management for you, that you understand this. I know you do. I know you've talked about this a lot. But this is really where this department is at right now. The population that shows right now for this city is 404, from what I understand. What our authorized positions are is 748. Those authorized positions stopped probably about in 2021, I believe. And so the city of Aurora has grown. Population has increased. According to Aurora's own population index, we are somewhere around 404. At 404, our staffing for the Aurora Police Department should be at 808. So right now, we are authorized at 748. We have 53
Good
vacancies.
morning, how are you?
And so we are actually,
Steph, can you please mute? Okay, sorry.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So, when you look at this model, does it take into account, there was a 2017 study that, sought to, I think, encourage, the department to move some, I think, more administrative positions that were done by uniformed personnel to civilians.
Yep.
Does your math take into account that?
yeah, it does, because what I've done, I've basically civilianized our entire administrative section now. So where we used to have captains and administrative, where I used to have them as quartermasters, where I used to have them in records and clerks and things like that, all of those positions have now been modified and changed back into patrol. So again, even with the modification, that is the non-sworn staff. The non-sworn staff would need to go up to stay leveled with the patrol staff or the sworn staff. So yeah, that is definitely all accounted for. We have basically changed right now. We have more increase as far as traffic investigators now. We have 12 of those. Like I said, our entire bureau related to administrative function has been completely non-sworn personnel now. So we are at a bare minimum. And these numbers reflect, again, sworn personnel. However they're used in an organization is up to the discretion of that organization. But even with that, these numbers still reflect that this department is woefully understaffed.
Can you say one more time? We're authorized at 748, but we should be at 800 and what?
808. If we were at a standard, even at 2 for 1,000, that would be 808
Yeah.
with a population of 404.
Yeah.
And then I think it's important too, because when you look at, again, what probably is our undocumented population here, I would say, again, this is anecdotal. I don't know. They're not in the census, but I would say you're probably looking somewhere between 20 to 30,000, if not more, of undocumented. Also, I reached out to the base. I did talk with Buckley and I asked, hey, are you counted into the infrastructure or to the population? And if I'm wrong on this, then please correct me. But they said we are not counted into the population of the city of Aurora. They are their standalone item, and there's 20,000 people out on that base. And so if we counted for say 20 to 30,000 undocumented plus another 20,000 on the base, the city population here is well over probably 450 as far as activity. And you are being staffed right now by 695 total personnel. And a big part of this, it's not even about the bodies. I mean, if we can get the bodies, great. That's wonderful. And we're trying for that without question. But if we can't get the bodies, the vacancy savings is what's used for things that improve how the officers can perform their job. It allows us to get new technology. It allows us to get Axon One. It allows us to get drones that we're moving towards. So again, I might not ever get the staffing of 808, but to be able to use that funds to get other technologies and other things, overtime details, again, SOS shifts, all these overtime details. If there's not funding based upon what this department population staffing level should be, that's always going to be a struggle. So that's what we're struggling with here. Again, very much far below Colorado average and incredibly below what the national standard is. And this data came from FBI data, and it also came from Bureau of Justice Administration, which focuses on staffing levels.
Yeah, Chief, how are you doing in terms of closing that gap as far as recruiting goes? Because the numbers are way up from what they used.
Yeah, recruiting, we're doing really good. Again, we have, we started the academy with 52. We're down, they attrited out, which is average because people get in there and say, I don't want it. We're at 46 right now. Even with that, right now with our authorized positions of 748, we have 53 vacancies. So we have another academy class that's going to be starting soon, but then with that also we have constantly attrition, we have retirements, we have people leaving. But we have put a big stop on that. We've got it really good under control. But if we went up to 808, that would be an additional 60 personnel that we would be down. So if you took the 60 and the 53, and if we said in a perfect world, 808 was our number, right now this department is down 113 personnel.
And what do you account? Because we can say that there's 695 currently on payroll. But again, at any given time, we have officers injured, sick, under investigation, on military duty. What would you say at any given, is that 20 officers, 30 officers at any
I give you the
given?
exact number. So right now, operational, full duty, we have 589.
So 589 from 695 on payroll.
Yep.
So we have 589 actually working.
And then, the reason for that is because we have 22, we have 12 that are in light duty, 6 military, 3 that are on injury leave and 1 restricted. In the academy right now, we have 48. And then we have 36 in training. They are going to actually come out a couple weeks early. So we're gonna get those out in the field. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted you guys to be aware of this and have knowledge of it, but this is something, again, and what's really struggling with this too is the demand. The demand has not changed. It's actually increased. And so again, 25 years, 30 years ago, where law enforcement was focused on crime fighting, now law enforcement has basically become everything to everybody. When you have somebody who's homeless, you're not calling a social service worker, you're calling law enforcement. When you have somebody who's experiencing major mental health crisis, you're not calling a clinician who's going to put them in some state institution because there are no more state institutions. And so again, who do you call? You're calling law enforcement. All these things that traditionally have been out of the realm of law enforcement has now unfortunately become normal place. And the load to our personnel, the load to our officers have increased. But again, the staffing is not. So that's.
So it is safe to say that given this 808 number, which is where we should be, and never mind who's on payroll, but if you take into account all of the officers that we do not have working on any given day here in Aurora, it is safe to say that we are down over 200 officers.
Yes. Yeah, or actually 113 to be honest with you, but right about there, yeah.
With respect to the hotspot policing, makes sense to me. Glad to see we're doing it. We talked about doing it before. Devil's advocate, that little part of our city that would say, oh, that's over policing and that's profiling, what would you say?
I'd say absolutely not, because it's really a strategic approach. It's not about over policing. Again, when they go into a hotspot area that's been identified, they aren't going in just for enforcement activity. When they go into a hotspot, they can just drive up, park for 15 minutes, have that presence there.
Right.
And the studies have found that that changes the dynamics of what occurs in that area. It's also about getting out and knocking and talking on doors. Hey, how you doing today? It's doing foot beats. It's doing things that are completely community focused.
Yeah.
There is an enforcement component though. I'm 100% and I am pressing. That's why I'm counting this, because there's people that need to go to jail.
Yes.
And there's things that have to happen. And so again, that's why I want to be able to measure the impact of what they do. And when I talk about the measurement, it's not just on the enforcement component, it's on the amount of time that they sat there, the amount of foot beats that they did, what activities did they do? And all of that is that approach.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure, Chief, that we're just focused on policing. And I understand we're under a consent decree and, maybe we feel like we have to provide all of this data to show that, we're arresting this many white people and this many Hispanic people and this many Black people. At the end of the day, for me, arrest whoever's committing crimes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's why I collect the data too, because the data itself tells the story. If there's a particular race or ethnicity that is involved in a higher level of use of forces, I want to also be able to show that same race or ethnicity, are they also involved in a higher number of crimes? Are they also victims of a higher number of crimes? And unless I'm capturing that, and looking at that and analyzing it, that's where I don't know, are we going in the right, directly in the right place?
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing about, that does not come into play in regards to the enforcement strategies or what this department is doing.
Yeah.
So that's the hotspot, and that's, again, I hope that answered what your question was. You can go to the next slide real quick. Another big aspect I talked about before quite a bit was officer wellness. Again, with the officers that we do have, I want to make sure that they're prepared, that they're efficient, that they have the support that they need to perform their task. And so again, we have worked with our wellness coordinator. He has put together a plan. We're actually doing what's known as, it's called Survey Monkey. That's going out, that's talking to all of our personnel and saying, hey, what are you enjoying about the job? What are you struggling with about the job? What can we do better? How can we perform better? What training do you need? I also did an analysis of all our complaints and all the terminations that, again, I've been involved with since being here to find out if there was any one specific pattern or one specific thing that has caused this type of issue. Some of it is alcohol. Again, so again, are we educating our officers on use of alcohol, making sure that they do it properly, making sure that they're not overusing it and going out? And I'm talking off duty stuff. I'm not talking, on the job stuff. Financial issues. Again, I found that financial issues was a problem within our department. Officers come here, they don't understand how to manage their money for whatever reason. And so again, we have a program now where we actually have a community member who came in who was actually giving financial advice to our officers, working through wellness and trying to adapt to that. The other things that we're looking at, again, is programs based on feedbacks. We have a system that's we're working through, wellness programs, findings. Where we have, you go in our station, you'll see these posters that are out there now that talk about it. But really, it's not just the feel good stuff. It's not the unicorns and rainbow stuff and that. It's about, do they feel supported in what they're doing?
Right.
And so again, we just did the modification on the pursuit policy. The biggest part of that to keep them engaged doing those pursuits is knowing that if they do that and if they make a mistake or if something happens to them, that it's not going to be thrown to the wolves and it's like, hey, we told you to do this, but now that you did it, it's not our problem. So all the policies and all the procedures have been refined and we work to make sure that they understand exactly what their discretion points are and what that accountability component splits at. And so that to me is a big part of wellness too. Because I want them to know that, hey, I'm here to support you 150%. If you do things correctly, if you do them ethically, if you do them morally. If they go off the track, I have no problem with discipline. I have no problem with terminations. I have no problem with modifications to their work schedules. I will do whatever is necessary to hold them accountable to the standard that this department has to have.
Yeah.
You go to the next slide. Again, audits, I know that at a city level, we get really high macro audits, which are really important to me. They focus on many things. I think you're gonna have a presentation here coming up shortly on weapons and things like that. But I also wanted to look at a micro level. Again, what are we doing internally at a level that we can focus on? And so we're doing an audit framework. If you could go to the next slide, please. Focusing again on our audits on crime management, RTCs, community engagement. Next slide. And we're looking at organizational and our wellness, making sure we're doing that. And then what this looks like here for our audit checklist, if you go to the next slide. So these are the things we're focused on, obviously, with the modification of the pursuit policy. It's actually October the 5th, we modified the pursuit policy to allow for DUI drivers. And so it's been incremental. I couldn't do that modification to where we're at now until I incrementally started making sure we had staff. And so we had no captains in any of the commands. They were being lieutenants. And so we promoted those captains, put them all in command. So now each command has their own captain to support their commander. Because the amount of paperwork and administrative functions that are generated by modifications to policies and procedures and tracking of information and data, it's really challenging. And so once we had the infrastructure internally to support this, this is where we started to move into the modifications of policies and procedures. So on the policies, again, I did it incrementally. They were not able to chase individuals that were driving under the influence, even though we had 557,000 calls of injuries or deaths related to that since 2019. And in Aurora 911, since 2019, there's been over 8,900 and some calls where community members have called and said, hey, there's a drunk driving down the road. Can you stop them? That was a part where an officer got behind a drunk driver. They turned on their lights. And if that person accelerated away, that's all that would happen. And so that was the aspect where we changed that policy where now they can go and pursue and stop that individual. After that, we found out that it was going good. So that's where the modification happened this week, where we modified it, where now if they see a stolen car, they have the capability and the ability to go into pursuit of a stolen car. So that's where we're at.
I think that's right. Can I just say real quick, with all of those calls for DUIs, and I mean, I've lived here my whole life, I see the people driving like that. But for January, it said we had 6 DUIs issued, and for February, 1. Is that just short
That was just
staffing?
traffic. That was just
Right,
traffic.
is that just being short-staffed? That we have
No,
one
there's other
DUI or
data that relates to that the patrol officers are doing, but that was just the traffic calls.
Got it, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So that was modification. So that's an audit we looked at. We're gonna look at our use of force because we changed our policy on use of force, how it gets adjudicated within the commands. Missing children, again, was something that was really interesting to me because you get somebody who's missing 10 years go by. How are we tracking that? And how are we ever bringing closure to that? So that was something I asked our investigators to do. Off-duty employment. That is a huge thing within this department that I found out. We have a lot of officers that work these jobs. I also found out that we had a lot of use of forces related to those. We had a couple of really bad incidences. So we modified our off-duty policy where now 2 officers have to go to each of those events or each of those locations. And then I also said, they were pulling up on their own cars. So they're going to work a King Supers or a Walmart and they're pulling up in their Toyota Supreme or whatever. And so I said, well, let's go ahead and have them take a black and white out. So the black and white can now act as deterrence. When it goes out there, it can park right in front of the store. People can see that presence. And so that was one thing that we're auditing. And we're also auditing our homeless outreach. We're going to have an additional 2 homeless outreach workers or HOPE teams or HEART teams, whatever we're calling them, that are going to be connected. That's going to work with the HEART program with the judge and then also work within the city as well. So that's what we're focused on, the community engagement.
On the 2 officer requirement, I know to go hands-on, there's always 2 officers, but so how does that work for on off duty? So in other words, do they have to, if it's like a King Supers, do they have to hire 2
Yes.
versus 1?
Yeah.
Okay,
They do. We found that one officer was going there
right.
and then they were getting involved in really bad situations. And there was no backup for them. There wasn't like they had, they're in uniform still, they're still there, but so that's where it said, hey, we needed to modify that. So now it's 2 at the locations that we feel that need it the most. And again, that's what we're tracking and we have.
And the department sets the hourly requirement? right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Contract it out, yeah. So that's what our audit calendar looks like. And then if you could go to the next slide. And then what we're looking for in our audit, if you go one more slide, please, I'd appreciate it. How we frame our audits, it's very similar to what the city does. I just put it in an executive summary, a purpose, a background, methodology, summary of findings, and then specific detailed findings, and then ultimately recommendations to modify or change what we're doing. And I think that is the important thing of everything that we're doing. None of this stuff is written in stone. We are going to change based on the facts and based upon the needs of the community. So I hope that gives you an idea of where our strategies are at and how we hope to impact crime and the betterment of this place.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Chief. The last item is the 5, public safety action plan update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason asked me to kind of facilitate this since he's not here today.
Sure.
So section 1, this is about resources for the Warwick Police Department. Chief, I'll let you or John just highlight quickly because we've got 8 minutes. So
Yeah, basically it shows where we're at. So for patrol, when you talk about where we were as far as patrol, how many police officers were actually out in the 3 districts. Again, I think that's an important number. It shows 219. Our actual deployment is based on total of 205 because the positions were not completely filled. There's some others. If you go down, let's see, Academy. So that's our grand total of what's actually staffed is 530. And then what we actually have, and that's out on these particular locations and these events is 448. And if you go all the way up to the top again, one more time, I'd appreciate it. And it shows why. So there's vacancies and then there's unavailable. So all the things that you mentioned earlier about like military leave or medical or light duty, that's the discrepancy in those particular numbers. And then the DART team, for an example. So the DART was moved from special operations back to patrol. So the patrol would have more opportunity to deal with them. And so we're really good with that. We increased those 18 and then the PAR teams too. So even though they're not under the umbrella of patrol, they're back in patrol where they weren't before. dark teams and were just in specialized units. And there was really no connection to the community that they were serving or the command that they were serving. And so it was kind of one of those, really kind of gray areas. So that's where they're back in there. That helps give them with the numbers.
I'm sorry, so on the dart, there's one dart team, right, on call at any, or working at any time.
So there's 3 dark teams, one for each district.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how we broke it down. Before they were all under special operations. And so I split them and put them into the districts so that they could attend roll calls, they could work with the officers. It's basically a way of supporting patrol or staffing up patrol without taking them out of that function, which was, enforcement proactive activities. Because I could have just gutted the dark team and thrown them into patrol and we'd have a higher number of patrol, but then we wouldn't have the proactive. All we'd have is guys just going from radio call to radio call to radio call, which is problematic in and of itself. And that's something that, again, Tina and I are working with really hard on priority dispatching. She's the SME on that without question, because we're trying to get the right calls going to the right people.
I mentioned DART has intercepted car thieves.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, section 2, this is about data collection and hotspots and so forth that Chief has talked about. Over the last 4 weeks, there's been a significant increase in non-fatal shootings by 60%, slight uptick in robbery, but overall, since the year, so these include January and February, crime is down pretty significantly. Chief, would you agree with that?
It's just what I talked about earlier. We're in a really good spot. We're down 667 some crimes from what we were last year. And what I always throw this out there, I know it sounds corny, but again, those numbers, sometimes you get lost in numbers, but those numbers reflect a body. They reflect a human. So to me, that's really important. And that's where we're at. We're down, again, a lot of that stuff in a really positive way.
Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, section 3, this is about looking at the Aurora Gang Reduction Impact Program and through youth violence prevention. Lisa,
I'm here.
oh, sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, and the chief mentioned the call-in, which is listed here. They're just talking about the impact of that. But to date, we've done 130 of those custom notifications with the average age of 17. Programs coming together. There's always room for improvement. Some lessons learned that came out of the SAVE program, working with probation and parole, and those conversations are ongoing. So I think just noting that those 3 had a pretty big impact. And then the success story really talks about one of the individuals that was at the call-in. So that's ongoing. There was impact there. I'll just keep going. The next piece is the crisis programs, which continues to work well, is being staffed up. The mayor and I met with UC Health last week and just reiterated the success of that partnership with them providing clinicians. We will be doing an RFP process this year to renew a contract for the clinician. It's been 3 years. And then at the Mayor Pro Tem suggestion late in 2024 to add some success stories there. So we have the other side of the data, right? Telling the stories behind the data, which is important. So if you scroll up, there's a few stories there related to impact the crisis team's having and just mitigating other calls for service and things that obviously take officers away for longer lengths of time. And then the last program is the homelessness program. We're seeing quite a bit of reduction in the areas where we've put some of those more modified trespassing signs on the 225 corridor. People have moved around a little bit. We've also seen success with having this shelter at the new navigation campus open nightly rather than just cold weather. We're seeing on average anywhere from about 100 to 140 individuals accessing shelter. And then just highlighting that our street outreach teams are having a lot of success with people taking services, going to shelter, and then also getting folks housed, through programs. So that is going well. And then I think one of the key successes there is we have someone with lived experience on our team, which really, really connects well with individuals, is trusted, and folks are willing to pretty much do anything he asks them to, which is really pretty special. And then our abatement team continues to work with the PD team, and those are going well. The new ordinance will come into play this week on the 15th. And we're meeting with police department tomorrow to just look at that, some modifications. We're also getting ready to do our new RFP with Keeson, our contractor that does abatements. And seeing if there's some flexibility for them to be able to do a little bit more emergency abatements, which is probably more like the next day they would be able to pick up items that are maybe left behind. They're not going to be on, an on-call 24/7 operation. We are working on that. And then there's some stories around veteran homelessness. We are leading the entire metro area and getting veterans housed. Again, I think that's attributed to some of our outreach team success. But we essentially ended the year with about half. We started 2024 with 62 individuals. And as of February, we were at 30. And that's on our by name list for veterans, which has been a big success.
Individuals, we were at 62 individuals, now we're at 30
Correct.
veteran individuals waiting for housing.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of those numbers, you're probably not able to say a point in time count that's official or.
Yeah, so the point in time count's done in January every year. We usually get official numbers in July from Metro Denver Homeless Initiative. So they deduplicate and they do all their data stuff on the back end, and we'll get an initial report in July. We usually bring that to council and policy committee like in August each year to share those numbers.
Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Oh, sure. Just on a somewhat related issue, I'm noticing a lot of shopping carts around, and I know we passed a policy on shopping carts. What's this? We have a contractor on that.
Eason is also the contractor on shopping carts to know where they're identified and pick up. That is being administered through our tax and licensing group. And so I'm happy to get you an update on how many have been collected and how much we've spent from the bag fees and stuff like that. Sometimes they're picked up from abatements, but there's also that separate program going on.
Jessica, just one thing I wanted to say, that I noticed actually, these no trespassing signs. I don't often drive through Denver, but I found myself driving through Denver. They have no trespassing
Area
signs.
closed, yeah.
Oh, they have no trespassing signs all over the city.
Yeah.
Now, I realize that they don't necessarily enforce like we enforce, but we're a little behind on this, actually. They have.
We're putting them up, yeah.
I understand, but I'm just saying we're a little behind on this. They have them all throughout the city.
Yeah.
The code is listed here, DRMC 38-115.
Yeah.
So we're actually behind on this, and I would like to see a lot of these signs.
We had to get the signs done. We have our code section on them.
The code section reflects just how theirs is, right? That it's closed. Nobody can be there. It works for soliciting, it works for
Everything.
people loitering, and like, you can't be there for any reason.
And that would also
It's
target
not-
panhandling.
Correct. Yeah.
So these signs are all over Denver.
Yes.
We were a little behind the 8 ball. I would like to see these signs all throughout Aurora, like they have in Denver. Because I saw that.
We have to pass something.
We did. Airport 10 took care of it.
I thought that was more-
We've got it covered. It's just that we had to get the signs designed and get them made and then get them put up. So
Ours
Ours
just-
passed in specific areas.
We started on the 225 corridor.
Right.
And we need to put them elsewhere.
But
So
the
we need to
ordinance
update that.
covers
Can you-
any area.
the ordinance works. We have a current, we just need to,
So we don't need to update it.
we don't need to update. We just need to have the manpower, Jessica, to get those signs put up where we want to put them up.
I just wanted to say, a couple years ago, we worked with CDOT to put just general no trespassing signs anywhere we could, that they would allow us with, the right of way areas. The ones that we have are more specific even than Denver, because it says if there's a health and safety hazard, this is a
I love it.
habitual location. So our ordinance becomes a little more
Yeah,
specific.
if this says violators subject to arrest citation, and then pursuant to, and it lists the code.
Yeah.
And I saw these all over Denver, and I started taking pictures at every single street corner. So I would like these throughout Aurora.
Ours are twice that size.
Well, that's great.
And they're better.
Good,
He wrote it.
When do you think you're gonna have this homeless outreach, your homeless outreach team? I think it's 2 officers.
We have 2 now, and then we're gonna have another 2
you already
coming out,
have 2?
yeah, and it should be within next month.
Oh, so those 2 are operational.
2 are already operational, they're up and going, and I got,
6 months, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love
they've
it.
been up for 6 months, and again, I think when you look at our numbers, I'll just give you a real quick number citywide where we are up from 1031 to 228, just so you know. Again, camping ban arrest, we did 4, warrant arrest, we did 36, PC arrest, we did 3. Total summons issued were 27. Total hours by those 2 officers was 203 hours and 55 minutes. Total people abated were 247. Total people housed, again, these are the numbers she gave earlier, but 43. And then again, what I wanted to do, we also broke it down just with those 2. I looked at each of the districts to make sure that it's fair based upon the needs. And so for abatements, for an example, again, District 1, there was 78, District 2, there was 60, and then in District 3, there was 62. And then all about the information is all equivalent across the board.
Okay.
So let's get into the action plan unless you have anything else.
No, I don't have anything else. I would just like an emphasis that these signs are all over Denver. I don't like being behind the 8 ball of Denver. So I would like these signs everywhere, everywhere as soon as possible. I just have one thing for miscellaneous matters before we go. Chief, if you can clarify, I have bail bondsmen reaching out to me. Personally, they're sending me these. This guy, I'm not even gonna discuss what he did allegedly to a child in this city. But there seems to be a disconnect. I spoke with an individual in the Aurora Police Department. It was explained to me is that it is not our policy to speak with bail bondsmen. Because sometimes in their arrest processes and stuff like that, it's unconstitutional. That piece I understand, but I would like to understand, this guy cut his ankle monitor, stopped showing up for court. This is out of Adams County. And this bail bondsman I have who is the assigned officer, or detective, and this specific bondsman has called multiple times and just wants to be told yes or no. Are we actively looking for them, or do they need to start sending their bounty hunters out? Is this an actual policy in place that we can't even tell a bondsman that we're looking for this individual?
I'm gonna have to be educated on that. I don't want to give you
Okay.
bad information. I'll
Okay.
look into
Well,
it.
then I'll just give this
That'd be great.
to you.
Yes,
I'll
please.
take a picture of all my notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so then that was all I have. I would just like an update on that
Got
policy,
it.
sir. So with that, our next meeting is going to be April 10th, right here, 9 AM in person, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Madam Chair, on behalf of the administrator, she wanted to apologize. She wanted to disrespect you or the committee. She's stuck in a personnel matter, but she wanted to,
Yeah.
she wanted me to let you know.
No worries. No worries. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.